The cafe was warm, in contrast to the freezing wind still clinging to their coats. Clara wrapped her hands around the cup as if it could warm her thoughts too. Across from her, Alex stared at the steam rising from his hot chocolate, silent for a few seconds too long. She broke the silence. "So, do you usually ask strangers to be your fake girlfriend?" He chuckled. "First time. I guess I panicked." Clara smiled, sipping carefully. She watched him, not just with her eyes, but with that instinct she'd developed over years of observing people in books. He looked tired, not just from the day, but from something deeper. "I'm a doctor, ER, Brooklyn Methodist, and I was supposed to get married last month." Clara blinked, taken aback. "And she left?" He nodded. "Said I was too absent, too focused on work. She met someone else, quicker than I imagined." Clara lowered her gaze. She wasn't great with pain, not other people's, but something in his voice didn't feel bitter. It felt unfinished. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to step into something so personal." "No, really. I should thank you. If you hadn't played along, I would have looked like a fool in front of two people who already think I'm falling apart." She hesitated, then said quietly, "You don't look broken, just human." Their eyes met. Long enough for the world outside to disappear. Long enough for neither of them to pretend anymore. Alex checked the time and stood up. "I should go. Shift starts in an hour." Then, unexpectedly, "Would you want to meet again?" Clara nodded, unsure of why her heart fluttered. Maybe it was the smile. Maybe it was something she didn't want to name just yet. It was early December. Christmas lights already blanketed the Fifth Avenue windows like a golden sheet over the frozen city. Clara hurried out of the Midtown Public Library, bundled in a beige coat, carrying 2 bags of books and a lukewarm coffee in the other hand. The gray sky mirrored the weight of her days, and the loneliness she never dared admit. That's when a man stumbled right in front of her. Tall, messy hair, scarf twisted around his neck. But his eyes, she had never seen such desperation in a gaze. "Please," he said, breathless. "Can you pretend to be my girlfriend for just 5 minutes?" She laughed, confused, thinking it was a prank. "I'm serious. My ex is coming with her new boyfriend. I can't look broken." And he subtly pointed toward a couple approaching through the Bryant Park walkway. Clara hesitated, but something in his voice, or maybe the pain behind the smile, made her nod. He gently pulled her close by the waist. "Call me Alex. I promise I'll explain everything later." The couple passed, and the woman gave Alex a surprised look. He tightened the hug, as if he didn't want to let go, and whispered, "Thank you. You have no idea how much this saved me." Once the ex disappeared into the crowd of tourists, he finally relaxed. "Can I buy you a hot chocolate? It's the least I can do." And that's how Clara, the girl of books and routines, walked into a cafe in the heart of New York's winter with a complete stranger and a strange tightness in her chest. She had no idea her life had just changed. Louisa's heart raced as she turned to face the woman who had interrupted them. The voice was sharp, assertive, and somehow familiar. The woman was tall, with dark, striking features, her eyes scanning the room with a possessiveness that Louisa couldn't ignore. She wore a red dress that clung to her figure, drawing attention as soon as she entered the ballroom. Daniel's expression faltered for a split second, and Louisa could see the tension in his shoulders. He cleared his throat before speaking. "Elena," he said, his voice tight. "This is Louisa. Louisa, this is Elena." Louisa extended her hand, a forced smile on her face. She could feel the electricity between them as their hands touched, but Elena's grip was firm, and there was an almost imperceptible coldness in her gaze. "It's a pleasure," Louisa said, trying to sound polite despite the awkwardness hanging in the air. Elena's eyes lingered on Daniel for a moment longer before she turned her attention back to Louisa, her smile too perfect to be genuine. "How interesting," Elena remarked, her voice laced with something Louisa couldn't quite place. "I didn't know you were dating, Daniel. You've certainly kept it quiet." Luisa's stomach twisted. The words hung in the air like a threat. There was something about Elena's presence, something that didn't sit right with her. She could tell that Elena wasn't just curious. She was trying to assert some kind of dominance, trying to claim what she thought was hers. Daniel shifted uncomfortably, and Luisa could see him flinch at Elena's words. He seemed to want to say something but held back, his jaw clenching as if he were fighting to keep his composure. Actually, Luisa and I, Daniel started, but Elena cut him off. Yes, I know. You're pretending. Elena's voice was light, almost teasing, but Luisa could see the edge behind it. But I don't see why you need to hide it. You two make a lovely couple, really. Luisa was stunned. Elena's words stung in a way she hadn't anticipated. It was clear now that the situation wasn't as simple as pretending to be someone's girlfriend for a night. It was a lot more complicated and dangerous. The evening seemed to blur as they moved from one conversation to the next. Elena kept watching them from afar, her presence always lingering, a silent threat in the background. Luisa's mind raced. She had never thought she would find herself in such a position, caught between two people, both of whom seemed to hold secrets. But despite everything, despite the discomfort, a part of her couldn't help but feel drawn to Daniel. There was something in his eyes, in the way he reacted to Elena, that told her there was more to the story, more than she could even begin to understand. As the night drew to a close, Daniel leaned in close to her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Can I talk to you outside for a moment?" His tone was urgent, and Luisa nodded, her heart pounding. As they stepped outside the venue, the cold night air hit Luisa's face like a wave. The sharpness of it was a stark contrast to the warmth of the ballroom, but it somehow felt more real, more alive. Daniel led her down a quiet street, the sounds of the city muffled by the towering buildings surrounding them. She didn't speak right away. Part of her wanted to know what was going on with him, what the truth was behind the mask he was wearing, but another part was scared of what she might hear. The tension between them had escalated ever since Elena's arrival, and now she could feel it even more intensely. Once they were away from the noise of the crowd, Daniel finally spoke. His voice was low, almost hesitant, as though he were unsure of how to begin. "I'm sorry about Elena," he started, running a hand through his messy hair. She's my ex. We've been trying to figure things out for a while now, but it's complicated." Luisa felt a knot tighten in her stomach. So much for the simple story of pretending to be his girlfriend. There was clearly more at play here than he had let on. "Complicated?" Luisa echoed, her voice barely a whisper. "Is that why you needed me to pretend? To make her jealous?" Daniel winced at the words, looking down at the ground for a moment as if gathering his thoughts. When he looked up again, his eyes were filled with regret. "No, it wasn't about that, not really. I needed a break from all of it. From her. From the expectations. And when I saw you, I don't know. I just thought maybe you could help me escape for a night. I never meant for this to get messy." Luisa felt her chest tighten. She could see the vulnerability in his eyes, and it broke something inside her. He wasn't as put together as she had assumed. He was just as lost as she was. "You didn't think this through, did you?" she asked, her voice trembling a little. "You put me in the middle of your mess." He nodded, guilt heavy in his gaze. "I didn't. And I'm sorry. I didn't expect things to get complicated, but they did. I didn't think Elena would show up. I didn't think I'd start feeling things for you." The words hung in the air like a confession, raw and unfiltered. Luisa felt her heart race at his admission, but she didn't know how to respond. She wasn't supposed to be feeling this way. This wasn't supposed to matter. It was supposed to be a simple lie, a brief escape. But it had turned into something much deeper. She wasn't sure if she was ready for this. "Daniel," she started, her voice soft. "I'm not sure what to do with all of this." He took a step closer, and for a moment, it felt like the world around them had quieted. His eyes locked onto hers, and there was no pretending anymore. The facade they had built had crumbled, leaving only truth and raw emotion. "I don't know what to do either, Luisa," he said quietly. but I can't ignore what's happening between us. I don't want to. The intensity of his gaze made her heart flutter, but at the same time, it left her feeling unsure. The pull between them was undeniable, but she wasn't ready to dive into something she didn't fully understand. She needed time to process. She needed space. I think we both need some time, Louisa whispered, stepping back slightly. This is all too much. Daniel's face fell, but he didn't argue. He simply nodded. I understand. They stood there in silence, the cold wind swirling around them. There was no resolution, no answers. Just two people caught in a moment, uncertain of where they stood, but undeniably drawn to each other. The days following their conversation felt like a blur. Louisa had returned to her apartment in Brooklyn, her mind spinning with everything that had transpired. Daniel's confession still echoed in her ears, and his vulnerable gaze haunted her thoughts. She tried to push it all aside, to focus on her own life, but it wasn't so easy. The pull she felt toward him was undeniable, and it made everything feel complicated. She couldn't stop thinking about him. Every time her phone buzzed, her heart skipped a beat, expecting it to be him. But it never was. Daniel had given her space, just as she had asked, but the silence between them made her restless. She wasn't sure if she was relieved or disappointed. The distance felt both like a relief and a weight. Meanwhile, Daniel was nowhere to be found. He hadn't called or texted, leaving her in the dark about what was going on in his life. She couldn't decide whether to reach out or wait for him to come back to her. Part of her was angry for feeling abandoned, but another part of her understood why he needed space. He was still tangled in his past with Elena, and she was now part of a situation she had never expected to be in. But despite all the questions and the uncertainty, one thing was clear. She couldn't stop thinking about him. One morning, a week after their conversation, Louisa received a message from an unknown number. Her heart raced as she opened it, wondering if it was Daniel, but the message was brief, almost too simple. Can we meet? I need to explain. Her fingers hovered over the phone for a moment, her mind racing. She hadn't heard from him in days, and now he was asking to meet. What did he need to explain? Did he finally make a decision? Did he want to pick up where they left off? She didn't have the answers, but her curiosity and the feelings she had for him pushed her to respond. When? She typed, trying to keep her emotions in check. Today, 3 p.m., Central Park. The message ended with a brief, "See you then," and that was it. No more explanation, no more details, just a time and a place. As the hours ticked by, Louisa's mind was consumed with thoughts of Daniel and the unknowns between them. She had spent the entire morning debating whether or not to go. She wasn't ready to face him, not fully. But in the end, she couldn't ignore the feeling that something important was waiting for her at Central Park. By 3 p.m., Louisa found herself standing in the park, her breath visible in the crisp air, watching the leaves fall from the trees. It was quiet there, peaceful, and for a moment, she wondered if she had made a mistake coming. But then she saw him. Daniel was walking toward her, his hands stuffed in his jacket pockets, his face serious but soft. He looked different from the man she had met in the ballroom. This version of him was raw, stripped of the masks he wore in front of others, and she couldn't help but feel drawn to him all over again. "Louisa," he said when he reached her, his voice hoarse, as though he hadn't spoken in days. She looked at him, her heart in her throat, unsure of what would come next. She was so close to him now, yet the distance between them felt more overwhelming than ever. I'm sorry for everything," he continued. "For the silence, for the confusion. I needed time to think, but now I know something. Something I can't ignore." Louisa's pulse quickened as she waited for him to say the words she'd been hoping to hear, but he remained silent, his eyes searching hers, as if trying to find the right words. The park around them seemed to disappear as the world narrowed down to just the two of them. The wind was picking up as Daniel stood before Louisa, his words hanging in the air like an unfinished sentence. She could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on her chest, making it harder to breathe. What did he want to say? What was this all leading to? She had never felt so torn, between wanting to hear what he had to say and fearing the truth he was about to reveal. The silence stretched on, and for a moment, all Louisa could hear was the rustle of the leaves around them, the distant hum of the city. She could see the vulnerability in Daniel's eyes, but that only made her heart ache more. She didn't want to get hurt. She couldn't afford to get involved in something so messy, something so uncertain. "I know I've messed this up," Daniel finally said, breaking the silence. His voice was strained, as if he were holding back something deep inside. "I thought I could handle it all, everything with Elena, everything with you, but I can't, not anymore." Louisa's heart raced as she processed his words. Elena. The woman who had somehow claimed space in her mind even when she wasn't around. The woman who had disrupted everything. But now, Daniel was telling her something that was breaking through the chaos. "I don't want to go back to her," Daniel continued, his voice trembling slightly. "I can't. I realized that what I was looking for was right here, in front of me. With you." Her breath caught in her throat. The words felt like a jolt of electricity, and she wasn't sure if she was ready to embrace them. She had wanted to hear him say this, but now that he had, she wasn't sure if she could trust him. She wasn't sure if she could believe in something so fragile. "I need you to know, Louisa," he added, stepping closer, his face earnest, "that I care about you. More than I've ever cared about anyone in a long time." Her chest tightened, and for a moment she couldn't speak. The emotions that had been building up inside her fears, her desires, her doubts, came rushing to the surface, leaving her paralyzed. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times in her mind, but now that it was happening, it felt surreal. "You care about me?" she whispered, almost to herself, as if testing the words. She couldn't fully understand why, but something inside her stirred at the sound of them. Daniel nodded. "Yes, I do. But I know I've hurt you, and I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I just needed you to know that I'm not running from this anymore. I'm not running from you." There was a long pause, and then Louisa found herself looking into his eyes, seeing the raw honesty in them. She wasn't sure if she was ready to open her heart again, to trust him completely, but the truth was undeniable. She had already fallen for him, in a way she never expected. "I'm scared," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Scared that it's too late. Scared that I'll get hurt." Daniel's face softened with empathy, and he reached out to gently take her hand in his. "I know, and I'm not asking you to trust me right away, but I am asking you to let me try, to show you that I'm serious. I don't want to lose you." The sincerity in his words melted the wall she had built around her heart. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to feel something other than fear, hope. She wasn't ready to throw herself into the unknown, but she could see a future with him, a future she wanted to explore. Without thinking, she took a small step closer to him. "I'll give you a chance," she said, her voice trembling. "But we have to take it slow." Daniel's face broke into a relieved smile, and he pulled her into a gentle embrace. It wasn't perfect, and there were still so many unanswered questions between them, but for the first time, Louisa felt a spark of possibility. The journey wasn't over, but maybe, just maybe, this was the beginning of something real. The days after their quiet yet significant moment in Central Park passed like a slow, tender rhythm. Louisa and Daniel spent more time together, but the shadows of their pasts, his with Elena, hers with the walls she had built around her heart, loomed over them like a cloud that couldn't fully dissipate. There was a quiet understanding between them that they were both unsure of what was coming next, but they were willing to face it together, step by step. Daniel, who had once been the man full of uncertainty and distance, was now opening up to her in ways she hadn't expected. He shared more of his past with her, the hurt he had endured from his previous relationship with Elena, and the confusion he had felt when everything came crashing down. It wasn't easy for him, but each revelation brought them closer, as though the puzzle pieces of his life were starting to fit together. But for Louisa, things weren't so simple. She had lived much of her life behind a mask, protecting herself from pain, hiding her vulnerabilities, and avoiding emotional connections. She had never allowed herself to fully trust someone, especially not someone like Daniel, who came with his own baggage. Still, she couldn't deny what she felt. Every time they were together, she saw a side of him that no one else did, vulnerable, regretful, and more real than anyone she had ever met. And for the first time in a long while, she wanted to let her guard down. She wanted to trust him. But the fear of being hurt again was always lurking in the back of her mind. One evening, as they sat together on a quiet rooftop overlooking the glittering skyline of New York, Louisa turned to him with a question that had been gnawing at her for days. "Daniel, why did you even ask me to pretend? Why me?" Daniel looked at her, his expression serious, the weight of her question sinking in. He had avoided this topic for days, afraid that it would only complicate things further. But now, as she stared at him with a mixture of curiosity and concern, he knew he couldn't keep hiding the truth. "I didn't know who else to turn to," he admitted quietly. "I didn't want to go to Elena, and I didn't want to be alone at that event. It wasn't just about making her jealous. It was about finding someone who could help me forget, even for a little while, the mess my life had become. And when I saw you, something just clicked. I didn't expect it, but there was something about you that made me feel different." Louisa's heart skipped a beat at his words. There was so much honesty in his voice, so much openness. She had never expected him to be so vulnerable, so raw. It was hard for her to process everything at once, but she could feel herself softening, her walls beginning to crack just a little more. "I wasn't expecting to feel this way," Daniel continued, his eyes meeting hers with a kind of intensity that made her stomach flutter. "But I'm glad I did, because now I'm not running away, not from you, not from anything." Louisa felt a surge of emotions, fear, hope, desire, all mingling together in a wave that almost overwhelmed her. She had spent so long pushing people away, convincing herself that she didn't need anyone. But Daniel had changed that. He had found a way past her walls, and she didn't know if she was ready for what that meant. For a moment, they sat in silence, their hands resting side by side, their fingers grazing lightly but not quite touching. It was as if they were both trying to decide whether to take the next step, whether to fully commit to whatever this was between them, knowing it was messy and uncertain, but undeniably real. "I'm scared too," Louisa said softly, breaking the silence. "I'm scared that I'll let myself get too close, and it will all fall apart." Daniel's hand finally found hers, and he squeezed it gently. "I'm scared too, but I think we have to take the risk. I want to be with you, Louisa. I'm willing to try, no matter how messy it gets." For the first time in a long time, Louisa allowed herself to believe in something she had thought was impossible: love, connection, and the possibility of healing. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Daniel and Louisa had slowly but surely found their rhythm. They spent more time together, long walks through Central Park, quiet dinners at small cafes in Brooklyn, moments of laughter and silence, each one stitching them closer. Every day they seemed to discover new pieces of each other, like uncovering the layers of a story they were both still learning to tell. But even as their connection deepened, the shadows of the past still lingered. Daniel was no longer running from the mess with Elena, but the traces of that relationship were still there. And Louisa, despite the growing love between them, still struggled with her fear of vulnerability. The walls she had spent years building were beginning to crumble, but they weren't gone yet. One evening, as they stood together on a bridge overlooking the East River, the lights of the city reflecting off the water, Daniel turned to her, his expression serious. "I need to ask you something," he said, his voice low. Louisa felt her heart skip a beat, uncertain of what was coming. Was this it? Was he going to pull away, or was he about to say something that would change everything? "Anything," she whispered, her breath visible in the cool air. Daniel looked at her with a mix of determination and uncertainty. "I want you to take a chance with me, Louisa. A real chance. No more pretending, no more games. I want us to be together. I want to build something real, something that isn't based on lies or fear." The words hit her like a tidal wave, sweeping over her in a rush of emotions. She had wanted this for so long, but now that it was right in front of her, she wasn't sure if she was ready to fully let go of her past. The scars, the hurts, the hesitation, it was all still there, buried beneath the surface. But when she looked into Daniel's eyes, she saw something that made her hesitate no longer. Hope, trust, and the raw honesty that had drawn her to him from the very beginning. "I'm scared, Daniel," she admitted, her voice trembling. "I'm scared that I'll get hurt again, that this will fall apart, like everything else in my life." Daniel reached for her hand, his fingers lacing with hers. "I'm scared too. But I can't let that stop me from wanting this, from wanting you. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I don't want to do this without you." For the first time, Louisa realized that she didn't need to have all the answers. She didn't need to control everything or predict the outcome. What she needed, what they both needed, was faith. The faith that sometimes the best things in life are the ones you take a chance on, even when you're terrified. She squeezed his hand, the words finally slipping from her lips, the words she had been holding back for so long. "Okay, let's take that leap together." And in that moment, as the city buzzed around them and the stars above seemed to shine just a little brighter, Louisa knew she had made the right choice. They didn't have all the answers. They didn't know what the future would bring, but they had each other, and that was enough to begin something beautiful.